You are not paranoid. You are calibrated. The scary part is that your distrust did not come from nowhere. It came from your brain quietly updating its model of people. And you did not notice the update until it started ruining your relationships. Quick thing before we go deeper. We are building toward 1,000 subscribers, and your subscription genuinely helps this channel reach people who actually care about the psychology, not the slogans. If this hits a nerve, tap like too, because it tells the algorithm this is worth distributing. Okay. If you have stopped trusting people's intentions, it probably looks like this. Someone says the right words, they show up with a smile, they offer help, and you still feel your body tense. Your mind goes searching for the angle, and the worst part is you cannot even explain it without sounding bitter. So you keep it to yourself, and that makes you feel even more isolated. Here is what is actually happening. You did not lose faith in humanity. You became sensitive to a specific class of social threat, the gap between stated intention and functional outcome. Not what people claim they mean, but what consistently happens after you believe them. And once your brain learns that gap exists, it starts treating good intention as a possible camouflage pattern. Most people never connect these dots because they think trust is about morals. It is not. Trust is about prediction. Let me show you what I mean with a simple rule your nervous system follows. Your brain does not reward honesty, it rewards accuracy. If someone lies but their behavior is predictable, your system can still relax around them. If someone claims to be kind but their behavior is inconsistent, your system stays vigilant, even if they never openly harm you. That vigilance feels like cynicism, but it is closer to a forecasting problem. Now here is where it gets interesting. There are at least 3 different ways your brain can stop trusting intentions, and they look identical on the surface. But the mechanism behind each one is different, which means the fix is different too. If you treat them all like the same issue, you get stuck in either isolation or constant overthinking. The first mechanism is what I call outcome-conditioned trust. This is when you used to trust based on signals like warmth, empathy, similarity, shared values, the kind of stuff people tell you to look for, but at some point you experienced a repeat pattern. People who signaled care still produced outcomes that cost you. Not necessarily betrayal. Sometimes it is smaller and more corrosive, like repeated disappointment, broken promises, subtle extraction of your time, or being emotionally leaned on without reciprocity. Your brain logs this as a reinforcement learning problem. Think about it like training a model. If nice words and friendly energy do not predict safety, the model reduces the weight of those inputs. You stop being moved by charm. You stop being impressed by sincerity. You start asking, what happens after this person gets what they want? Because that is where the real data is. Notice the pattern here. Your distrust is not aimed at people. It is aimed at the unreliability of social signals. And that is why you can meet someone who is genuinely good and still feel nothing but suspicion. Because you are not evaluating their character. You are evaluating the reliability of the channel through which character is communicated. And you have learnt that channel is noisy. Here is the concrete way this shows up. Someone apologizes. A normal reaction would be relief. But your brain asks, is this apology an intention, or is it a tactic to reset the consequences? You watch whether their behavior changes when the social pressure fades. You track delay. You track pattern. You track whether the apology costs them anything. Because in your internal math, cost is credibility. If you have ever thought if they really meant it, it would be inconvenient for them, and you are already doing outcome-conditioned trust. But there is a second mechanism that is more brutal, and it hides under the same word, distrust. It is not about signal noise. It is about motive opacity. Motive opacity is what happens when your brain realizes that intentions are private and you cannot observe them directly. You can only infer them from behavior, and behavior can be strategically manipulated. Once that lands emotionally, not just intellectually, you start treating every social interaction like a game with hidden information. Game theory is useful here. In a repeated game, trust emerges when you can punish defection and reward cooperation, and when the other player cares about future rounds. But modern life quietly destroys both conditions. People can enter your life briefly, extract value, and leave with minimal consequence. They can maintain reputation in one context while exploiting in another. They can look cooperative because the environment rewards looking cooperative. So your brain adapts. It stops asking, "Is this person good?" and starts asking, "What incentives are they under right now?" Think about this for a second. You can feel warmth for someone and still not trust them if you suspect their incentives will shift. You might even say, "They mean well," but that phrase is a tell. It means you are separating intention from predicted action. And yes, some people do mean well. The point is that meaning well is not a stable property. It is a state. It depends on sleep, stress, status threat, scarcity, social audience, and what they think they can get away with. When you have been burned, you stop trusting stable traits and you start tracking states. Here is the part most people miss. Cynicism is often an upgrade in model sophistication. It just feels like a downgrade in hope. Now there is a third mechanism, and this one is sneaky because it can happen even if nobody betrayed you in any dramatic way. It is what I call self-protective attribution drift. Attribution is how you explain why people do what they do. When you are safe, you attribute generously. You think they forgot, they are stressed they did not realize. When you are threatened repeatedly, your attribution system shifts to reduce future vulnerability. You start attributing behavior to intention, because intention is easier to protect against than randomness. Randomness is terrifying because you cannot prepare for it. Malice is weirdly comforting because at least it is coherent. If you decide someone has bad intentions, you can build rules, you can set boundaries, you can predict. So after enough inconsistent pain, your mind starts preferring the explanation that gives you control, even if it makes you lonelier. Let me make that real. If someone cancels plans 3 times, there are multiple explanations. They could be overwhelmed, they could be disorganized, they could be avoidant, they could be selfish. The moment your system gets tired, it picks the interpretation that requires the least emotional risk. They do not care. That interpretation might be wrong in a specific case, but it is efficient. And your brain is an efficiency machine. This is not you being dramatic. It is your threat system trying to compress complexity into a rule that keeps you from getting blindsided again. Okay, stay with me, because this next part recontextualizes everything. Most people think distrust is caused by bad people, but a huge amount of distrust is caused by good people behaving inconsistently across contexts. Not lying, not scheming, just being different versions of themselves depending on who is watching, what they need, and what mood they are in. And your brain is built to detect exactly that. There is research on thin slicing, where people can infer traits from minimal cues. But there is a darker version of thin slicing that develops after social pain. You become hypersensitive to micro-incongruence, tiny mismatches between tone and content, a smile that arrives late, warm words with a flat body, a compliment that subtly positions you below them, a favor that arrives with a hidden invoice. You start noticing that people do not just communicate information, they communicate hierarchy, leverage, and plausible deniability. And once you see that layer, You cannot unsee it. Now watch what happens when you apply this to your everyday life. You meet someone new, they are charismatic, they ask questions, they seem invested. Old, you would think, this is promising. New, you thinks, this could be acquisition behavior, because predators, marketers, and emotionally hungry people all use the same initial interface: attention. That is the modern trust problem in one line. Attention looks like care, but attention is also how people harvest. So your nervous system starts requiring a different proof. It wants temporal consistency. It wants constraint-based evidence. It wants to see what they do when there is no reward, no audience, and no immediate payoff. But here is the trap. If you never let people close enough to generate that evidence, you never get updated. Your model stays frozen at people are unsafe, not because it is true, but because you stopped running experiments. That is why this can become a self-sealing belief system, and it is also why simple advice like trust again is useless. Trust is not a decision. Trust is an inference. So what do you do with this without becoming naive again? Here is the framework that actually works, and it is not based on positive thinking. It is based on separating three things your brain has been blending together: intention, incentive, and capability. Intention is what they say they want. Incentive is what they gain or lose by acting a certain way. Capability is whether they can follow through even if they want to. Most people judge only intention. Cynical people judge only incentive. Wise people triangulate all three. Let me show you what that looks like in practice. Someone says, "I want to support you." Intention. You ask internally, what is their incentive? Do they gain closeness, status, access or control by supporting you? Not automatically bad, but relevant. Then you ask, do they have the capability? Do they have emotional bandwidth, follow through, conflict tolerance, and the life stability required to be consistent? Because a person can have good intention and clean incentive and still harm you through incapability. This is where a lot of adult heartbreak actually comes from. Not malice, not manipulation, not incompatibility between what someone wants to be and what they can reliably do. And if your distrust is high, it might be because your life has been full of incapable, good-intentioned people. People who love you but cannot regulate. People who promise but cannot plan. People who care but fold under stress. Over time, your system learns. Intention is cheap. Now here is the payoff. Once you separate intention from capability, you stop taking inconsistency personally. You stop turning every letdown into a character judgment. You can say, I believe you mean it. I also believe you cannot sustain it. That is a completely different emotional experience than nobody means what they say. And then there is the final layer, the one that actually restores your ability to trust without self-betrayal. You stop treating trust as a trait you give, and you start treating it as a contract you stage. Staged trust means you do not jump from 0 to 100. You design interactions that reveal incentive and capability gradually. Small commitments first, low-cost tests, time-bound responsibilities, shared projects with clear edges. You watch not for perfection, but for repair. Repair is the real signal. Everybody missteps. Trustworthy people repair quickly, specifically, and without making you manage their emotions. Untrustworthy people either avoid repair or they turn repair into theatre. This is why your body tenses when someone gives you a big dramatic apology. Your nervous system has learned that performance can substitute for change, so you want behavioral repair, not emotional display. If you want one question that cuts through almost everything, it is this. When it costs them something, do they still behave the same way? Cost reveals incentive. Stress reveals capability, time reveals intention. And if you have stopped trusting people's intentions, it might be because you finally learned to trust the only thing that does not lie: repeated behavior under constraint. So let us close the loop with the uncomfortable truth I opened with. You are not broken for seeing the angle. You are seeing the architecture of social life more clearly than you used to. The goal is not to go back to blind trust. The goal is to move from impression-based trust to evidence-based trust without turning your whole life into a courtroom. Pay attention this week to one thing: how often you judge someone's intention when what you really needed to judge was their incentive or their capability. And that single distinction can give you your social confidence back. If this changed how you see the people around you, I would genuinely like to hear what pattern you noticed first in the comments. And keep this in your head the next time someone says, "Trust me." Trust is not a feeling. Trust is a prediction you can defend.